Okay, so here we are with part 2 of topic 12. Um, so I know there's a lot of information in this topic, and so just bear with me. A lot of this is stuff we've talked about a little, and we're trying to bring it all together. And we're kind of at the point now where we're trying to answer the question, why is it that sometimes these things cause us disease and sometimes they don't? We can be colonized by bacteria. Some of them are giving us diarrhea. Some of them are living happily with us and causing us no harm. So this is where we're at the point where we want to talk about infections versus disease and pathogenesis and things like that. So this is kind of the big concept for part 2 of this course. And these are all going to be, by the way, lots of exam type questions in the fill in the blank. You can see A, B, C, D. I could, take part D and ask you to fill in the blank, maybe list 3 examples or something like that. So for all of these sections, I want you to learn at least, let's say, 2 examples for each of these things. So what is this thing? This is called the mechanisms of pathogenicity. Our textbook is kind of calling them requirements for infection, but you can be infected without having disease. So I don't really like that term so much because we really want to talk about how things become pathogenic and cause disease. And so these mechanisms, by the way, you can see the definitions: pathogenicity, the ability of a microbe to cause disease. Almost pathogen city. My spell checker changed it to pathogen city, if you can believe it or not. So I thought that was kind of a funny little thing that happened to me. And I might throw out the other word virulence, which means kind of the ability or the severity of something to cause disease. So you might talk about a virulence factor, such as a toxin, which is something that can cause disease. And it might be more virulent, means it's caused more severe disease, and so on. So let's get into these. But all of these things are required for a pathogen to cause disease. We kind of talked about the transmission part. That sort of happens before this. The pathogen gets to you. It could be aerosol, could be sexual contact, could be direct contact, and so on. And then once it gets to you, all these sort of check boxes have to be clicked before you end up having some sort of disease. So let's take a look at these. You can see the first part, portals of entry. So let's get into that. So portals of entry really just mean, how does the microorganism get to your body system to cause that disease? There's a bunch of different routes. The first route, we often talk about the mucous membranes. So the mucous membranes are epithelial linings. They line a lot of our body systems, and they usually secrete moisture and mucus. And so we're really talking about the respiratory system, digestive system, urogenital system. Sometimes people throw the conjunctiva in there as mucous membranes as well. So they're thin layers, and they have moisture, and they're all potential routes. So we might talk about the oral route, meaning things go in the mouth. Sometimes we talk about the fecal oral mouth, meaning we're looking at where it's coming from. So some sort of fecal matter ends up in the mouth, which leads to disease, which is pretty common for a lot of infections, particularly foodborne and waterborne infections. So oral route, we could include, let's say Giardia. That would be a good example. Remember, that's contaminated water. We could talk about salmonella. Let's say maybe somebody has some undercooked meat with salmonella in it, or your cookie dough or something like that. Respiratory route, of course, that's a lot of respiratory infections. So we could talk about COVID. We could talk about the common cold. We could talk about the flu, and so on. Tuberculosis, those are respiratory route. Sexual route, so from sexual intercourse. So a lot of sexually transmitted diseases, so gonorrhea, chlamydia, and so on. And then the conjunctiva, that's basically eye infection. So usually we might call that pink eye or conjunctivitis, right? And so, usually you're looking at people rubbing their eyes with their hands. And so in many cases, there's different types of infections that can go there. Pseudomonas can end up being an infection there. We could have staphylococcus. There's quite a few that can affect the eyeball. There we go. Okay, there's a table in the textbook you can check out, table 5-1, if you're looking for some more examples, and also my notes. There are some more examples there. I think I talked about a lot of these. Oral route, you can see there's a few others. We'll talk about eventually ulcers, hepatitis, and so on. A second route is the skin, and sometimes we often talk about the skin, and sometimes we also talk about the parenteral route as kind of being a separate mechanism. Skin, you're looking at microorganisms on the skin that are getting into hair follicles or sweat glands and things like that. Sometimes a scratch in the skin or something like that. Parenteral usually means injection. It can be a needle or it can be an injection from like an insect. So, you could be looking at a needle stick injury, or you could be looking at some sort of vector-borne disease, maybe caused by mosquito, let's say West Nile virus or something like that. Another portal of entry is the placenta. So that means the mother to the fetus during pregnancy. And this is different from mother to child during childbirth. Some diseases can get to the child during birth. So HIV is very rare to cross the placenta unless there's some sort of rupture, but the infection can happen during childbirth. But there are some pathogens that can get across the placenta during pregnancy and can cause birth defects. Couple that we've talked about already are syphilis. We also talked about toxoplasma. Another good example is Zika virus can cause changes to the head size and a few other things like that. And there's a few others. Those are kind of the good ones to learn. Rubella is another one. Rubella is a virus vaccine preventable disease. It used to be a big deal when people were pregnant, and they were very worried about getting rubella and measles because it can cause birth defects and miscarriages and things like that. And now I've never met anyone who's had rubella because of vaccinations. There's an old acronym that the TORCH acronym. You may or may not have heard of this one. And this is all mother to child, so not necessarily placenta, but it's kind of an interesting little acronym that works for this. So T is for toxo, and we'll get back to O in a moment. R is for rubella. So you can see it kind of fits. You're probably wondering where syphilis and Zika are, but I'll get there in a second. Like I said, this TORCH acronym isn't necessarily for placenta, but can be mother to child through childbirth as well. C is for cytomegalovirus. You can look that one up. It's usually not very serious unless people have some sort of other complication. H is for herpes simplex. So we're talking about cold sores, or we're talking about genital herpes. Genital herpes, if a woman is having a flare-up and then giving birth, that can lead to infection of the infant, and can sometimes be quite serious if the infant, again, you've got an immune system that's not fully developed. O stands for other. So other includes syphilis, HIV, Zika, and so on. I'll show you another acronym here. I think I have it on the next slide. There's other people that are trying to, expand this to include everything. And so cheap torches is another one. And you can see it's including the hepatitis, chickenpox, parvovirus, a few things we haven't mentioned. But anyway, if you're interested in that kind of thing. But placenta is really, like I said, during pregnancy. Many of these are during childbirth. And so they're kind of thrown into the same list. So something to think about is portal of entry can be very specific to an organism, right? Just because a pathogen gets to your body doesn't mean it's going to cause disease. Here's a couple examples, right? Streptococcus. You get it in your lungs, can cause pneumonia, right? Eat some and no disease, right? Streptococcus pneumonia doesn't seem to cause any disease of the digestive tract. So it is specific diseases, specific areas. Salmonella. If you eat salmonella, that can give you salmonellosis or typhoid fever, right? And that's very serious disease. But if you get it on your skin, no disease. So just keep in mind, pathogens sometimes they need to get to the right body parts or the wrong body parts, depending on how you look at it, to cause the actual infection. Okay, so part B, the microorganism has made it to your body. but in many cases, it can't cause disease unless it is there in sufficient numbers. So you have to be exposed to, in many cases, a lot of these things in order to cause disease. There's measurements for these. You can see this measurement here, ID50. So it's a measurement where this is the infectious dose, 50%, and it means that this is usually done in animals, but has been done in humans for some diseases. And this is basically looking at how many microorganisms will cause half the people to be sick, right? Because the infectious dose is actually different for different individuals based on their health state and those kind of things. Here's some numbers you can see. For example, most pathogenic E. coli, for example, the ones that cause traveler's diarrhea, you have to be exposed to millions of them before you get the traveler's diarrhea. I know that's really gross. You have to drink a lot of contaminated water and millions of E. coli cells in order to get you sick. E. coli 0157, this is the nasty one you hear about in the news. That's like the Calgary outbreak. Less than 100 cells. So much, much more infectious and causes much more severe disease. Really, really crazy. Here's some other numbers. Cholera depends on the individual. Some people it's in the lower thousands, some people it's in the hundreds of millions. Very different for different people. Inhalation anthrax, a few thousand endospores. So if you get 100 endospores, probably not going to get sick. Here's some viruses. So papillomavirus, thousands of virons. Influenza and SARS-CoV-2 we think is in the hundreds. Norovirus, super infectious, only 20 virus particles. This is why it spreads so well. It's very, very infectious. Last one here, check this one out, smallpox and Ebola virus. Maybe one virus particle is enough to get somebody sick. Isn't that incredible? So this is a factor, right? You have to be exposed to enough organisms to get sick. In most cases, the numbers are very high. There's obviously always exceptions with these things. Okay, so the microorganism has made it to you, has a portal of entry. It has made it in sufficient numbers. It also needs to attach somehow, and that's what C is. And so most of these microorganisms have some sort of way to attach to the tissues that they're trying to get into. Depends on the microorganism. We talked about some of these things already. So for bacteria, for example, we talked about pili and fimbriae. Remember, there's the sex pilus, but a lot of pili are just kind of hair-like structures that can attach to things. So the E. coli strains that can cause bladder infections, most E. coli strains can't cause bladder infections. And that's why we don't all get bladder infections all the time. And unfortunately, it means some people get them quite regularly because their intestine is colonized with the ones that can attach to bladder tissue. There's lots of other things. Some of these you can see they're called adhesins. These are usually proteins that can attach to something on a tissue. I'm not going to get into those, but there's a few different types. We talked about the slime layers and the capsules. Remember, these are glycocalyx, glyco meaning sugar. Oops, we'll go back a slide. Glyco meaning sugar and calyx meaning coat. And yeah, so, without these capsules or slime layers, some of these microorganisms can't attach and they're not pathogenic. You can actually make genetic mutants where you remove these and you can inject them into mice and the mice are just fine. You put the capsule back and it kills them. A lot of the parasites we talked about have all sorts of weird structures, hooks and suckers and things like that. And there's some pictures of some of them on these tapeworms and that fluke over there. This is often actually a way to identify the actual parasite by looking at their head and seeing what kinds of suckers and hooks and things like that they have. I don't know a lot about identification of tapeworms in this manner, but that's my understanding of how it works. Ooh, there's a mistake. I'll just skip that slide there. I meant to, I guess, stop the part one a little earlier. Okay, so these pathogens have made it in and they've attached. The next stage is they have to usually get deeper into tissues, and in many cases they also have to evade or escape your immune system. So I've got this broken into 5 examples of how these things work, and so let's take a look at these. So first is the apical complex. So we talked about this one before. This is relevant for these 3 organisms covered in this class. Plasmodium causes malaria, Toxoplasma causes toxo, and Cryptosporidium. And they have this special kind of organelle type structure on them. And I think of it sort of as a mechanical and enzymatic drill. And so this allows them to get inside of cells, basically, is what they're trying to do. And once they can get in, that's actually a great place to hide from the immune system as well. A lot of microorganisms have all sorts of proteins or enzymes that help them to evade and invade. And a lot of these are called invasins. I know all these weird words. Anytime you see IN on the end of something, it means some sort of protein. And usually the first part of the word is a clue as to what it is. So this is some sort of protein that's allowing them to invade. You can see this little cartoon is representing Salmonella or Listeria. And they have these proteins, and these proteins actually stimulate endocytosis from the host cell. And so then they get inside and they hide, right? And there's quite a few examples of these kind of things. I'll probably talk a little bit more about Salmonella later on in the semester here. Here's a picture of Treponema. This is the organism that causes syphilis. These spirochetes are really good at invading tissues as well. They have all sorts of enzymes that allow them to do so. This was on the cover of our textbook, I think maybe in the first edition, if I remember correctly. We also talked about hemolysins. Remember those? They are what you see evidence of them on the blood agar, and they're breaking open red blood cells, and so those are invasins or enzymes that allow them to do that. There's many examples. You can read about them in the textbook. I'm not going to get into all of them. Here's another one, coagulase and staphylococcus. I won't test you on this one, but you can read about it in the textbook. Collagenases, hydroxyuronurases, these are basically breaking down connective tissue, and you can see they're invading the different tissues there. Some of these are quite invasive. So Streptococcus pyogenes, this is the organism that normally causes strep throat. Some strains of this have all sorts of enzymes that can invade all sorts of tissues, and sometimes this is the organism that's responsible for flesh-eating disease. And you can see there's a picture of it there, invading the tissues and destroying the tissues, making them necrotic, which means dead tissue. You can see the blackness around that person's looks like a foot or something. So how else are these things evading the immune system or escaping the immune system? The capsules and the slime layers can help them do this. You can find capsules and slime layers in both gram-positive and gram-negative organisms. And they basically make it harder for the immune cells to grab on. You can imagine anything slimy is hard to grab onto, and that's what these capsules and slime layers are doing, is they're making it hard for the immune cells to grab on. And sometimes it helps them to survive phagocytosis, but this picture here is showing it being blocking phagocytosis. Another strategy we talked about to fool the immune system is, we talked about this with the flu virus, and this is officially called antigenic variation. So what does that mean? The flu virus mutates, right? And so you get these, remember the hemagglutinin, that's the H, and the neuraminidase, that's the N. Those are the main proteins the immune system sees, and they mutate and they change slowly. And so this means year to year, every year, there's a new flu shot because there are new flu viruses circulating around. And there are a lot of viruses that do this. Some of them do it very slowly. Flu does it relatively rapidly. HIV even much faster. Some microorganisms, such as Plasmodium, have actually molecular mechanisms for doing this. They actually change the surface proteins they have on their cell membranes. And so you can get malaria, and you can get it again and again and again, because they're very good at doing this. You do get some immunity, so the more you get malaria, the less severe it tends to be. But it's something that's very hard to build a vaccine for. And there's actually a couple of malaria vaccines now that have been approved just in the last couple of years. And I don't know exactly what they're doing to get around this trick, but it took them a long time to develop these vaccines. As I mentioned, something else you can do as a microorganism is hide inside cells. And that way the immune system can't find you, right? So here's a list of some pathogens that are very good at getting inside human cells. And then once they're hiding in there, they can grow and do their thing. And of course, the immune system can't really track them there because they're hiding inside our own cells. Tuberculosis, we'll talk about it a little bit more in one of the last lectures of the course. And most of these other ones, some of them we've talked about, some of them we won't. But we will come back and talk about tuberculosis. Okay, so these organisms have found their way to a body. They've invaded in sufficient numbers. They're able to attach. They're able to escape the immune system. And now, how are they causing disease? And really, there's kind of 2 or 3 answers to this, depending on how you look at this. But we kind of have this written down as cytopathic effects and cytological effects. So let's talk about these 2 things. You can see the definition there of a cytopathic effect. This is the damage of a host cell or change in a host cell due to the virus growing in it, right? So if the virus is destroying the host cells, then that's an obvious one, and that's a type of cytopathic effect. So it's destroying the host cells and causing damage to tissues. So if it was in your throat, it might mean a sore throat. If it was in your nose, it might mean a sore nose. If it's on your skin, it could be a blister or a rash or something like that. Here's a picture of herpes simplex virus. These cells here on the left, so this cell is kind of a normal human cell. And you can see these ones here on the right are ones that have been changed, and they've got giant nuclei. Some of them are multinucleated, and so you're ending up with tissues that are not normal and can lead to blisters and inflammation and things like that. I thought I had some other examples here. Oh yes, here's an example, some examples from the textbook, and you can see measles virus, for example, causing a rash. There's varicella zoster, that's the chickenpox, also causing a rash. Rubella causing a rash. So just some examples of viruses causing changes in our cells that lead to human pathologies. Okay, let's talk about cytological effects. And actually, we've talked about these a lot already. We've talked about endotoxins and exotoxins. Maybe one more we'll add to the list. So this is just a little bit of review for you about what toxins are. So toxins are not microorganisms. So they're not replicated, they're not replicating, they're not infectious. They're things usually made by the microorganisms or the pathogens. You can find them in bacteria, you can find them in fungi, you can find them in protozoans. And some of them can be relatively benign. Some of them can cause very serious disease. Some of them short-term, long-term. So there's tons and tons of these toxins that have been identified over the years. And just mostly reviewing some of the ones that we've talked about already. So the first way to break down the toxins into 2 categories, endotoxins and exotoxins. And so endotoxins, if you remember, we're mostly talking about the gram-negative lipopolysaccharide. And so what is that? That's something that's found as a part of the microorganism, found in the, remember gram-negatives have two cell membranes? So the outer cell membrane has a special lipid in there called lipid A, which is part of something called the lipopolysaccharide. So maybe I'll write that down. It's probably in the notes somewhere. Lipopolysaccharide. And often that's just called LPS, so lipopolysaccharide. And so that's a unique molecule. And so if these microorganisms get into, let's say, our blood, and then they get destroyed by our immune system or antibiotics, and their parts, their pieces are floating around in the blood, and our body sees these LPSs and is like, whoa, what is that? That's not human. We should have an immune reaction. And so this can lead to an immune reaction called a septic shock. So I'll talk a little bit more about septic shock in a minute, but so usually you're talking about, this can be pretty serious if you're old or immunocompromised. And there's a lot of symptoms. You can get low blood pressure, in some cases even organ failure from this. In some cases can be quite serious. Like I said, I'll get back to and talk about that here in a couple of minutes. Here's a picture from the textbook showing the endotoxins being released. You can see over here we've got some gram-negative bacteria being destroyed by an immune cell, and the endotoxin is getting released, it's getting into the blood, and that can lead to our septic shock. Sometimes it's just a low-grade fever and low blood pressure, but like I said, in some cases it can get very serious, particularly if you're immunocompromised or really old person or something like that. Elderly people seem to be the ones that get it the most seriously, or really young babies, right? Because their immune systems are much weaker. Here's a slide. Septic shock. Okay, what did we say? It's a serious condition caused by endotoxins, leads to low blood pressure, possible tissue damage, all these things we talked about. Like I said, low blood pressure is kind of the common symptom seen in all these things, but many other things, right? You can see fever, rapid heart rate, sometimes rashes, sometimes confusion, unconsciousness, things like that. So part 2 are the exotoxins. So exo means outside. These are things that are secreted, and the most that we know of are from gram-positives, although there are gram-negative examples. So these are things secreted, usually they're proteins, and some of them are super, super potent, very, very strong. So if you remember some of the examples we talked about, we'll get to that in a second, but you can see there's an image from the textbook. You can see there's secreted things, so the bacteria is still living, and it's destroying some tissue here on the right. So here's some examples from the textbook, a big table here. I think the ones I have circled are all ones we've talked about or will talk about in this course, but there's many, many out there. Diphtheria toxin is one I might mention as well at some point. So our examples, we have the botulinum toxin. This is found that causes botulism. And so this is from Clostridium botulinum, which is a soil bacterium. And one of the big risks that we talked about before was found in canned food. So if you're ever in a grocery store and you see a can that's swollen, you don't want to eat that. Or if you've got canned food that has black in it, don't eat that, please. You don't want botulism. It's a very, very potent toxin that causes paralysis. Here's the picture I showed you way back at the beginning of the semester. You can see you've got your neuron and you've got your muscle cells. And so the botulinum toxin, it gets right in there and blocks this transmission and causes paralysis, and can in some cases be very, very serious. Incidentally, there's therapeutic uses of this toxin, and this is where we get Botox from. And I showed you this picture here before of somebody who's having some strained muscles in the face, and they're probably getting headaches and things like that. And so this was developed as a therapeutic for people with these muscle issues. And, we're looking at using the toxin in very, very, very low concentrations. Of course, didn't take long before people realized that it also makes the wrinkles look less wrinkly. And so Botox now is a billion-dollar industry where people are getting it to try to make themselves look a little more youthful. There's, when I Googled Botox, Hillary Clinton here came up as a potential user, and there are probably many, many other celebrities and politicians using Botox. Another toxin was the tetanus toxin, which is from a similar related organism, Clostridium tetani. Actually even looks similar to the botulism toxin. I put this little nail up here, and it's not really from rusty nails and rusty things. It's from dirt, right? And so rusty nails usually are found in dirt, and it's the dirt is the issue. And if you get punctured by that rusty nail, then maybe you're getting dirt, inside your body. And if you get the organism, the Clostridium organism, you can get tetanus. So also can be localized, and so sometimes if people have it in the jaw, it's called lockjaw. And there's the image I showed you before, so you can see we've got two sets of neurons coming to your muscle cells. Some of them are stimulus, and some of them are telling your muscles to relax. And so what the tetanus toxin does is it blocks these inhibitory neurons. So it blocks the ones that tell you to relax, and so you end up with clenched muscles. And that's what tetanus is. So here's another example, and mostly I just wanted to show you another word, enterotoxin. So entero, and specifically entero, means gut, right? So enterotoxins, this is an example of the cholera enterotoxin. It's kind of a cool toxin. I wanted to show you that as well. It has two parts. You can see it's got a B part that attaches to your cells and the A part that does the nasty work. So enterotoxins are basically toxins that are affecting your gut, and they're often causing diarrhea, and that's exactly what cholera does. So I want to talk about one more type of toxin. Some of these are actually called super antigens. So there's the word super antigen. I meant to put that in bold. And these ones can stimulate really massive immune responses. This is probably actually worse than septic shock. This thing is called toxic shock, and I'll talk about those in a minute. So if you're a user of tampons, you may have heard of toxic shock. You've on the box or in the instructions comes this big warning about toxic shock syndrome. And so let me just talk about this for a minute. You don't have to be a tampon user to get toxic shock. What you need to have is a staph infection and a staph that's producing this toxin. And so I'll talk about that in a minute. So why is it associated with tampons? This was something that originated, I believe it was in the 1980s. There was a company, at least a couple of companies producing tampons that were extremely absorptive, and they're advertising that you could keep the tampon in for the entire duration of your period. I'm just leaving a pause here because I'm imagining some of you are shocked. Yes, yeah, that's as gross as it sounds. And so what are you doing in this case is you're making a blood culture. And so this is giving a chance for the staphylococcus to grow over a few days, right? And so this is a bad thing. We don't want this to happen. So this is why, we don't have these tampons anymore. And the recommendation is to not leave it in for too long, because we don't want to be having these staph cultures. But anyone with a staph infection, a blood infection, can get toxic shock. It's just a little more likely to happen with tampon users. It's not that common, but it does happen, and people get these infections. So this is a special type of staph that has this toxin. So TSST. What does that stand for? Toxic shock staphylococcus toxin or something like that. It's a really bad acronym. And so now we're looking at a massive immune response as well, much worse than septic shock. So I'll take a look. I'll show you what the symptoms look like here in a moment here. I was actually going to make this chart on the doc cam. And unfortunately, I don't have that option today. But what I'll do is I'll just, I've animated this PowerPoint to kind of go over some of the symptoms for this. So first, I just want to compare, right, like what we're looking at. Septic shock, remember that is the lipopolysaccharide endotoxin. And that is, we're talking about basically gram-negative organisms. Just a second here. Sorry, I just had to respond to something in my house here. Whereas the toxic shock, we're talking about an exotoxin. And so that one I just showed you, so the TSST is one that's found in Staphylococcus. There's another one also found in Streptococcus pyogenes. So you can see the same, that organism just pops up again and again and again, right? And so we're really looking at different phenomenon, even though they have overlaps in both names and unfortunately some of the symptoms. So let's look at septic shock first. So gram negatives, what are your risk factors? In many cases, we're looking at people with infections already, and particularly people with compromised immune systems. So people are hospitalized, elderly seem to be sort of the stereotypical victims of septic shock, but also sometimes people, like I said, really, really young babies as well in some cases. The symptoms I told you, drop in blood pressure, fever, confusion, organ failure in some severe cases can be really serious. Something I didn't know about was widespread blood clotting. Obviously, that is a big deal, which can be why it can lead to death in some cases. I'll get to the diagnosis and treatments here in a minute. Let's look at toxic shock. So you've got this toxin being produced by staph or streptococcus. So risk factors are, as I mentioned, tampons, and anytime you might get staph or strep giving you blood infections, so some sort of skin wound or surgery or something like that. So a little bit of a different profile, right? Symptoms, fever, low blood pressure, similar symptoms. These toxins can also cause other issues such as blood or skin peeling. You can look up the symptoms. There's probably at least 20 of them, but I tried to just narrow it down to the most common ones. And in many cases, can be actually more serious than septic shock, renal failure, death, and obviously serious complications. So both of these things, diagnosis is usually a blood culture and trying to treat the symptoms, sometimes antibiotics. And anyway, I won't be asking you a thorough amount about this on the final exam. You know, it could pop up in a multiple choice or two. So worth to know a little bit about septic shock and toxic shock. Okay, I'm gonna just take a tangent here and talk a little bit about pathogenic E. coli. Yeah, so I think we talked about E. coli before, and I may have showed you this exact slide. And if you look at E. coli, many strains would be basically classified as non-pathogenic. They're not going to make you sick. I could give you a beaker of it, and you could drink it, and you'd be just fine. You know, maybe your stool would be a little runny, but it wouldn't really be significant. Some are definitely pathogenic. These ones can make us sick. These are the ones you hear about in the news. They're causing traveler's diarrhea, or they're causing much more severe illness. And all these things have acronyms. Don't worry about the acronyms for them. And then there's a bunch of E. coli that fall into the potentially pathogenic category. So this one here, UPEC, for example, stands for uropathogenic. So it's not pathogenic, but if it gets into your urethra, it can cause a urinary tract infection. So I want to kind of talk about why some of these E. coli are pathogenic and why some are not. And you're going to see that some of these principles of pathogenicity are going to be applied to this part of the lecture. So let's take a look here. So urinary tract infections, I mentioned that. I've got a slide on this here in a moment. And gastrointestinal infections. Those are kind of the main E. coli infections. E. coli, unfortunately, can get into other body parts and can cause other infections. They're a lot more rare, but it does happen, unfortunately. And like I said, a lot of these have acronyms. There's the acronyms. Don't worry about what they all mean. Usually they have EC on the back for E. coli, so ETEC or EPEC. And then entero means a gut infection of some sort, and then different things going on in terms of why they're classified differently. I just want to address some of these examples a little bit so you have an idea of what we're looking at for E. coli infections. First group, UPEC, uropathogenic. So these ones are usually just getting into the wrong body part. In this case, the urethra or the bladder. Sometimes I've heard this called honeymooner's cystitis. What is cystitis? It's a urinary tract infection, basically. So what do they mean by that? Well, sometimes people start getting urinary tract infections, women in particular, when they become sexually active. If you think about, as I mentioned in the previous lecture, the female anatomy, you have the urethra and the anus are relatively close, and the vagina, and so the bacteria in those parts of the body can intermingle. And when people become sexually active, women become sexually active, you know, there's a little bit more mixing of the flora in those areas, we'll say. And so this can lead to urinary tract infections. These bacteria need to have a certain type of pili called the P. pili or the P. fimbriae in order to cause these infections. And that's why not everyone gets them. Not all E. coli have them. So this is a classic example of an opportunistic infection where you've got a bacterium going from the wrong, or getting from the right body part to the wrong body part, changing anatomy. So here's a list of some of these enterotoxigenic E. coli's, or the ones causing gastrointestinal infections. You can see there's the acronyms there on the left. Don't worry about that too much. You can see the symptoms are some sort of gastrointestinal symptoms, so diarrhea, in some cases bloody diarrhea. But notice these things I haven't read. These are the virulence factors: having pili, toxins, adhesion proteins, more toxins, pili, flagella. So all of these things are helping them cause disease. These are all things we were just talking about in the previous slides in terms of virulence factors, things that are allowing them to invade tissues and cause cytological effects. I think I've got a slide for each of these, just a little bit of an overview of what these things are. This ETEC, enterotoxigenic E. coli, is the one that is usually associated with traveler's diarrhea. So this is contamination with human waste. So if you take a look, I've got a map here of parts of the world that they just don't have the same sanitation that we have in Canada. So the red areas are higher risk. And when you have less sanitation, you've got and you have human fecal matter that can contaminate the water, then you can be at risk. If you live in these areas of the world, you can get resistant to it. You can build immunity to it. And if you move away, you can lose that immunity and end up with diarrhea when you move back. This is not completely comprehensive. It's just a general idea. But again, it's a sanitation and water treatment kind of issue. Probiotics may help, so check those out. Check out those products. EPEC is one mostly associated with infant or child diarrhea in developing countries. Again, associated with water sanitation. I think I've mentioned this before. A lesson to anybody who's on Google Images. Think about what you're searching for. I was looking for something to do with diarrhea, and there's some pretty nasty pictures out there. So here's a sanitized one for you. So EHEC is the one I want to talk about just for a minute or two, because this is the one that we hear about in the disease all the time. So the H in EHEC stands for hemorrhagic. So hemorrhagic means bloody diarrhea. And this is the one that causes severe illness, and this is the one that was in that outbreak in Calgary. And so you can see in red that this one here is associated with animal feces. So this is a little different than the other ones here. E. coli 0157, this is the main strain that we're talking about. There are other strains, and this is the one associated with all sorts of food recalls. So sometimes it's hamburger meat. A couple of years ago, it was spinach. There was a sprout recall, and so it's associated with sometimes food recalls. You're probably thinking, which animal? This animal here. It is associated with cows. Cows are carriers of this pathogen, and they don't get sick from it. And so if there's situations where cow manure has contaminated a water supply, or in the case of the spinach recall a few years ago, it was the case where there was farms near each other, and one was a cow farm, and there was some flooding, and so the cow manure went from the cow farm and got into the spinach farm, and when spinach grows, it can incorporate some of that dirt and stuff into the spinach, and it was inside the spinach, and so you can't just get rid of it by washing it. And so that was kind of a freak accident that contaminated a whole bunch of romaine lettuce. So this is the one you hear about, and like I said, this can be very, very serious. We're talking about a bloody diarrhea. We can talk about causing septic shock in people and causing very severe illness and deaths in some cases. I'm not going to get into all the details on this, other than it just has a lot of virulence factors and toxins that can do weird things. When it invades the human cells, it can make these pedestals, kind of like making its own toilet seat, where it's dumping all its garbage and toxins into our cells and killing them and causing that bloody diarrhea. If you heard about the Walkerton water crisis, this was in the year 2000. This was a while ago, and this was a case where some water from some farm fields had got into a town reservoir and made a lot of people sick. I'm not going to get into all the details on this. It's a really tragic case of where people were not, looking at the warnings with the water testing and things like that. And so people went to jail for this. It was a really, really sad story. Can't remember how many people got sick. I think it was like 1,500 people, and there were a number of deaths as well. It's a very, very sad story. Here's a slide from the textbook, and just going over, all the issues from getting E. coli 0157, and you can see it's talking about the bloody diarrhea here on the left, and it's something that can resolve itself. And this is a case where it may actually be dangerous in some cases to give people antibiotics, because that can lead to the microorganism releasing endotoxins and actually causing septic shock. So in some cases, they're trying to treat the symptoms and hoping the body will clear itself and not cause more severe disease. On the right, you can see it's talking about, make sure you cook your ground meat and those kind of things. Okay, so we're kind of wrapping up this unit here. It was a little longer than I hoped, but I'm almost done, so I'm going to go through these last few slides. The last thing is the portal of exit. This just means, the microorganism, if it wants to go infect someone else, it needs to get out of the body. And these are usually the same places as the entrance parts, with the exception of the feces and urine, because that's an exit. So it can be the skin, it can be the lungs, it can be the sexual organs, and so on. So, like I said, know these things, know what each of them are, and I would say learn about, let's say 2 to 3 examples for each of these things, right? Obviously, I spent a little bit more time on some areas than others, but these definitely will translate to exam questions in some forms or another. And it's a really important concept to understand why pathogens can cause disease sometimes, and then other times cannot cause disease. Okay, just a few other things to kind of tie up this unit. There's a big section in the textbook that kind of talks about disease and defines disease and symptoms and syndromes and things like that. I'm just going to touch on a few concepts here, and there's probably a few more definitions in the notes. Something we talk about when we look at diseases often is the incubation period. And so that's the time when the organism has found the body, but there's no symptoms yet, right? And so it takes a little bit of time to grow and then eventually cause disease. Here's a slide. You can see the incubation periods can range from like a few hours to a few days to a couple of weeks. COVID-19 was kind of a big surprise because the incubation period turns out was, could be up to 14 days. Most people less than 10 days, but in many cases, it's a long time for a virus to be on a body and people don't even know they have it. And so lots of potential to spread to other people, unfortunately. Usually, once the microorganism has a time to propagate and grow, then it can start to cause symptoms, and that's going to lead to disease and illness. And eventually that's going to be resolved. Either the organism is, the person's going to, the immune response or medical treatments will fix them, or death, right? And then that's obviously a resolution of the illness. What else was I going to say about this? So I was just going to show you a couple other things here. I found this, there's a couple of these on the internet showing, this is COVID-19, for example. And this is, I know this has a lot going on here, but if you take a look at this, right, this purple or purplish line here is actually the incubation period. So you can see it takes a number of days where there's not really a lot of symptoms and the number of microorganisms is going up. And they eventually start to see symptoms for COVID, right? And so at this point, you're seeing, people are coughing, having fevers, sometimes, issues in the lungs and things like that. And you can see that some people are having symptoms in the second and third week. And so a lot of these are inflammatory kind of symptoms. And so this is something people look at, when they're trying to understand and treat diseases, because treating someone early on, you're looking at antivirals and treating, respiratory symptoms. Later on, you're looking at steroids and things like that that are going to, modulate the immune system and whatnot. Here's another one I found as well that's kind of showing some similar symptoms and whatnot. I'm not going to get into all the details on this one this semester. Last slide is just other things to consider about susceptibility to disease, right? So all of these other things here can be predispositions to either better or worse disease, right? So your age, how healthy you are you immunocompromised? Your diet can affect what microorganisms can affect your gut. Are you on some sort of other medication? Climate, weather. So everything we talked about, things are always a lot more complicated and more nuanced. And so just some other things to think about. Okay, so that is the end of topic 12. Again, sorry that I wasn't able to make it to campus and give you these recordings. I'm hoping you can get some good use out of them. You can watch them multiple times if you need to, and keep in mind topic 12 is an important topic, as they all are. So just make sure that you do review this and get as much as you can out of it. I will see you in class.